Well, I think the first thing is I came from a musical family, um, and where my father was a singer, not by profession, but a very good singer, and the radio was always on, and I had uncles that played guitars and accordions. It was basically an old school Italian-American family, and you know, I grew up with them all sitting around the table singing songs and laughing and like that. And then it was, I went to a couple of rock and roll shows at the Brooklyn Fox Theater, which and this was, like 9 years old or something like that. And I got to see these Alan Freed shows with, this, litany of Chuck Berry and the Impalas and all of those, the Drifters, groups like that, So I was quickly infatuated, and at the same time I was taking accordion lessons myself because my Italian grandfather had brought me back an accordion from Italy on a trip that he made. So I was kind of, unknowingly, having a foundation in music built around me without me even consciously being aware. And, as I look back now, I can recognize it, but, it was just how I came up. So.
And at what stage did you think, that you might want to pursue it professionally?
Well, I was 12 when I got my first gig. I got some kind of gig. A neighbor called, and her son was a guitarist, and I played the accordion. My friend was on guitar, and there was a trumpet player. That's all I remember, which is kind of a really weird kind of trio. And so it was at that point, and I think I made $20, and I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then from there, I was just in it, started putting bands together in the early 60s. I think if I had a role model of the band that was inspiring me, I recently did a list of my 10 favorite albums, and 12 by 5, the Rolling Stones, that came out in 1964, was kind of like the record that, I modeled every band I was trying to put together since then on. So, started putting bands together in high school, and became one of the bands around, first in the neighborhood and then in the tri-state area of New York and Queens and Brooklyn and New Jersey, and just basically worked my way in clubs all through high school and college. And to where the last band of that scene was a band called Alive and Kickin', and we were a house band at one of the major clubs in Manhattan. I was basically going to college and playing 6 nights a week at a club in Manhattan. So,
and you were on keys, right, in that band, but you're a multi-instrumentalist, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to call myself an instrumentalist, because I know people who are really great musicians, and I don't consider myself a great musician. I'm a songwriter, and really that's what I really always aspired to be. There was just something for me about the songs and who wrote the songs that around everything was where I was. So I think I'm a good songwriter, but as a musician, I played bass in bands. I played keys, as you said. I play guitar, but it's kind of, I call it songwriter musician. So, that's that anyway.
So in terms of, how you actually learned to play, and obviously, you've got an amazing legacy as a songwriter, but, how ambitious were you on the playing side? If you were always keen to be a songwriter, did you learn to read music and really put in the graft work there like that? Or were you always more focused on the song?
I kind of was always, I mean, first of all, I did learn to read music when I was young, taking the accordion lessons. So I guess I had some kind of basic understanding. But for me, as a songwriter and as a musician, where I really focused my energy musically was really in understanding chord progressions and how they went together. So that wasn't so much of reading the music, but it was really an understanding of chord structure and also song structure, and that came by listening and imitating and then practicing and expanding the amount of patterns that you could work out within different chord structures and rhythms. So that was kind of how my musicality plays into what I do.
And what was the first songwriting experience that you can remember? Because your first hit, I guess, was with Tommy James and the Shondells, right?
Yes. But I started writing songs when I was in high school, and I started writing songs for the bands that I was forming and playing in the clubs with. Typically in those days, you weren't playing original material. You were basically a cover band. But my bands always, wrote songs, whether we could play them or not, and we would do demos so that was always a goal, to be a band that could get to a place where they could be playing their original songs. So I guess I started writing songs in high school is the answer to the question.
But your songwriting style, during these early experiences, did you develop a methodology for writing songs that you've kept with you all along, or are you a songwriter where it really does change for you depending on the circumstance, depending on the genre? Because obviously you've written across genres.
Yeah, I think that, in the beginning, I listened back to the songs on the Alive and Kickin' album. I was in this band Alive and Kickin' that we formed in, I think, 1967 or 68 or something like that. And then in 1970, we had this hit song, Tighter and Tighter, and we got to do an album. And, if you listen to the songs on that album, they're adventurous, other than the hit single, which I didn't write. The other songs that I was contributing writer to with the other guys in the band were, written about things that I had no idea of, mostly of what I was writing about. There was Kentucky Fire and Mississippi Mud and Junction Creek and Mother Carey's Chicken. I was a kid that grew up in Brooklyn. So, I was more trying to imagine the kind of cool and the kind of thing that I wanted to write, more than which ended up really being my strength as a songwriter, was coming from writing about what I know and from an emotional place with what I know. But it was formative for sure. On your journey as a songwriter, you want to go places that, you're experimenting and you don't know. And so we were young and we were full of energy and full of ideas. The arrangements are all over the place. There's 100 parts in the song, so in some ways I look at it now, it was naive in a way, but also, it had a youthful energy and desire that compensates for a lot,
Yeah. Well, I really enjoy those records, the Tommy James and the Shondells records. And
Tommy James is, in my opinion, should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
No, he wasn't.
He's not yet. No, he's not. And but I think that when you do Moni Moni and Crimson and Clover and Crystal Blue Persuasion, and I Think We're Alone Now, and he was right on. He was right on the cutting edge of what was happening right in that moment, and that's 1969 and 1970. right in that powerhouse, you know, and he was at that moment, you know, one of the biggest pop stars in America, and I don't know how far around the world he went, but certainly in America. And he was very innovative and experimental in his recording techniques, which was another aspect of things that was beginning to happen in those years, where you know, there's an interesting concept of creating within your limits, and you know, with the recording techniques that we had when I was, you know, a teenager starting out, where it was basically, you know, 2-track tape, maybe 4-track tape, you know, and so within that, you had to learn to you know, develop ideas and find creative ways to come up with sounds and reverbs and delays and parts and building, you know, it was a whole other thing. And Tommy was great at that. And so, you know, as a kid, when he, you know, when he first took me into the studio, it was a great learning experience for me. Because I had desired for so long to even get in the studio. And as a kid, when I had my early bands, we couldn't afford to be in a studio. It wasn't like it is now where you can just record on anything that you happen to have around your house. And, you know, when I first started writing songs, I would literally sing them and write them because I had nothing to record them on. So I would write the words out. But in order to remember the song that I wrote, I would have to sing it so many times until it was just buried in my system. So I knew it, you know, I mean, and wouldn't forget it, you know, so it's just interesting how things have changed, but anyway, rambling on here.
Well, it's a very good point, because nowadays anybody can make a song, which is great. It allows opportunity for everybody, and you know, at the same time, it does set the bar very low. Anybody can record a song, whereas in the past, to be in a recording studio, you know, the recording studio was almost like a sacred place. It was like, wow, we're finally in here. It's like,
yeah,
you know, you're in some kind of exclusive club that you've tried to get into for many years, and finally you're now on the inside, and the graft that you have to put in to even be allowed in there is huge.
Exactly.
And I feel that's why, maybe that's why I really feel musically like pop music in the 70s, in particular, 60s, 70s, 80s. Musically, I felt it was better played and more sophisticated for me. I know there's great musicians nowadays, but they're not necessarily in the pop charts. You know, pop charts these days have some wonderful stuff in, but I don't know, on balance, I'm saying, you know, commercial music tended to be.
No, I mean, I won't disagree with you. I kind of agree with that. You know, I mean, the thing is that you know, you create with the tools that you have, and that is still happening. You know, songwriters and record makers now are making great records. You know, and they're using the tools at their disposal. They're experimenting. They're stretching those tools, and they're creating new sounds and new things. And that's all good. As it applies to musicality, yeah, probably in most cases there's a lot less musicality than was going on in the 70s, because those records were played by real musicians who had to play in time and had to, you know, have a certain level of skill. And many of them, like me, had spent so much time playing night after night in clubs that you just can't help but develop to a certain level. And that's not to say that the studio isn't a different beast, because it is, because there is a difference of playing live and how you have to play on a recording. Generally, there's a subtlety there of transition that has to be made. But yeah, people are still creative in a good way. But as far as musicality, there was probably more music then. You know, I mean, I always wanted to have strings on a record. It was just like a fantasy as a kid because, I would hear these records that had orchestrations. And when you're just in a little rock and roll band and you're a songwriter, you write these songs, you're envisioning all these parts in your head. So there was a period of my career as I got later into the 70s where, I put strings on a lot of stuff because I was able to, and now I've kind of come full circle where now I'm back to less is more. So it's all a game and a circle that you just kind of run around with ultimately.
Yeah, and your kind of mood and your taste in the moment, in any given year or month or whatever will change.
Yeah.
Obviously. But so, a large part of your career and life and, a wonderful part of it has been, collaborating and writing for and working with Donna Summer. I'd love to hear you, as our listeners would, I'm almost certain, they would love to hear about,
Sure.
How did you guys meet, and how did this kind of start? Because it's some of the best recorded music of all time, in my opinion.
I would agree, but I don't say that as a result of me. I say that as a result of the talent of Donna, Giorgio, Pete, Jorgen Koppers, Bob Esty, Harold Faltermeyer, Keith Forsey. And those are the names that I would put out there as it relates to that specific music. Yeah, I was fortunate to contribute in some ways on some things, and it's great. But so anyway, so I met Donna in 1977 in Los Angeles, California, and we met at a mutual friend's house. We had, I was with Joe Esposito and Eddie Hokinson, my two partners from my group that I was starting in that particular time called Brooklyn Dreams. And the three of us met Donna on the same day, and we instantly started writing songs. And, and Donna and I just clicked, and we literally spent like the next 5 days writing. And just hanging out and writing, and we had this instant connection, and we had a lot of good times between Donna and the Brooklyn Dreams and her our friend Susan Mineo, who was another girl from Brooklyn that worked at Casablanca Records. And so there was this whole pocket of time in the late 70s where we worked together on a lot of projects. We did a tour together where the Dreams went out on tour with Donna. I got to co-write 4 songs on her Bad Girls album and be the cop on the cover. So it was a great, exciting moment. We were going very fast. She was at the pinnacle of her career. Donna was a super amazing person on every level. I just learned so many things from her. And super spontaneous, super creative, unlike anybody I've ever known. And compassionate, full of love, as funny as could be, made you feel really comfortable, even though, she would walk in the room and could intimidate the room because of her charisma, not in any aggressive kind of way, but she comes in and it's like, wow, what happened here? And she just had that kind of energy, but yeah. Super generous. She was just an amazing person on many levels. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and the music is just extraordinary. I mean, one of the tracks that you wrote, co-wrote was the even the title track from the Bad Girls album. I mean, that is just such a good song. Like,
Yeah.
and it's every aspect of it. The production, you know, what was it like making these records in the studio?
Well, it was the level of talent was super high, and Giorgio is a great producer, and he has a really good sense of melody and song structure, and at the same time, he has a very good way of surrounding himself with people who are super talented in their own right, but yet respect him. And he, at the same time, along with Pete, were able to direct these people and at the same time leave them enough room to be who they were. And I think that's a great environment for making great music. And then when you had somebody like Donna, who was so in tune with her character for a song, how she would approach it vocally. It's very difficult for singers who have great voices, who are, I will say, singers, to put a connection with emotion and character, and to be able to twist and adapt their vocal technique to the character and the color that the song demands. And this is where Donna was amazing. So, she could sing any genre. She owned it. It wasn't like if she sang an R&B song, she was like trying to be an R&B singer. She was the best R&B singer. She was the best rock and roll singer. She was she was had that much vocal talent, but also the gifting to shade her voice depending on the song. So with a song like Bad Girls, she my strength as a songwriter, I've come to understand over time, is as a storyteller. I can be driven to, and be inspired to write in a creative way when I have a story to tell and when I know what that story is. Not to say that there aren't times where I'm just pulling lines out of the sky and it's inspired and I don't really have a center yet. That happens as well. But, so Bad Girls came about. There was another friend of mine from Brooklyn whose name was Bob Inky Corvia, and he had moved out to LA around the same time and built a recording studio in Burbank called Magic Wand. And so, because he was a neighborhood friend, the Brooklyn Dreams, Joe and Eddie and myself and Donna, sometimes, we would have an idea at whatever hour of the day or night and call Inky up and say, hey, can we come in and just record? And even if we didn't have ideas, we would just like to do that. It's kind of how we would hang out. So we would set mics up around the room. Eddie would play a little percussion. We'd hit record on a 2-track machine and just vibe for hours. And Bad Girls was an idea that Donna had, just coming out of a story of Casablanca Records being on Sunset Boulevard, and the girls that were having to work at Casablanca, and it was across the street from a place that was kind of like a call girl hang, and so there was always a little bit of drama that went on with passerbys in the cars and things like that. So that was kind of like the inception of the song, so we kind of recorded it in Magic Wand on a little 2-track with a bunch of other songs that we just came up with on the spot. We used to like to write stream of consciousness, so we would just go, and we kind of had just a flow going that every now and then you lock into something and like everybody's got it, and we're like, so. That's kind of how we spent a lot of time in those days. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going now.
what an amazing time. And yeah, just what incredible records. Do you have any kind of favorite like deep cuts from your time working with Donna? You know, like from those classic albums. You know, is there like an album track hidden away, or a kind of a lesser known thing? Because there were so many hits.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorites. I mean, to fans, none of these songs are you know, unknown. But a song that wasn't a single is "Our Love." Our love will last forever. Just a really cool track. And you know, it's you know, taken me many years, because, and it's not something that I've even thought about until recently, to where I go back and I listen to the Bad Girls album and I see how so many songs are somehow paralleling what was going on in our relationship at that time. And I didn't realize it so much until recently. But it was an exciting time. We were on fire, you know, and you know, it was a culmination point. It's like when you pop a pimple that, you know, it's like everything is building and building. I mean, great things were going on. But when you're in that moment, that peak moment of your career, and this kind of was going on for everybody there in the room. It was like everybody was sharing in this completely magical moment, and that goes to Casablanca Records and Neil Bogart and everybody that worked there. It was just an energy that couldn't be denied, and that, you know, you were just excited to be a part of. And when you're surrounded by that energy, it just spikes all your creativity in a really in a good way, you know. So there was, you know, made a good record.
Yeah, unbelievable, and almost, you know, I don't know, like they're not underrated, because they are, you know, widely considered to be, you know, absolute monsters and classics. But at the same time, you know, it's like I really would encourage my listeners, if they haven't, you know, to listen to the Bad Girls album, for example, like the whole way through, because every track is killer. It's not just the big hit singles, and that goes for all of those albums. You know, Donna Summer is an albums artist as well as a hit singles artist. You know, these are like kind of like the Michael Jackson, the three classic Michael Jackson records in terms of quality. I'd say Donna's records are kind of like that level, you know, like greatest of all time type of level, for sure.
Without a doubt, you know, and you know, it's like the credibility of that and the appreciation of that continues to grow, you know, because it comes from a very interesting time, because, you know, we were in a moment of transition, you know, and we were transitioning out of, you know, the hard rock thing, and there was a lot of there was a lot of ego in that. And there was a lot of rock and roll energy, and so you know, so there was a bit of resentment that happened in that moment, where people were you know, weren't giving due to actually what those records that Donna was making. Yeah, you know, but when you go back and listen to what they did now, starting with the Love to Love You Baby album, through Love Trilogy and Once Upon a Time, and The Wanderer. We're doing the 40th anniversary of The Wanderer, coming out right now as we speak. You know, into Bad Girls, and I Remember Yesterday, all those records, you know, they were great, you know, conceptual records with great material, great songs, great production. You know, I always say that the engineer, whose name is Jorgen Koppers, never gets mentioned. And if you listen to the sound on those records, impeccable. You know, he doesn't get enough praise, I don't think. You know, he did a great job with the sound of those records. You know, going from records that had big orchestrations into songs that were the beginning of, you know, how do you record a synth? You know, and what do you do with it, and how do you create a delay, and how do you process it? All of those things. So shout out to Jorgen Koppers.
Yeah, it's good to hear his name mentioned, and it's a great thing to hear as well that you do take time. Earlier you took time to shout out all the different people who are involved. You know, obviously you hear names like Giorgio Moroder a lot because he's just turned into a legend, and he's had a rebirth in terms of being known about amongst young music fans with his Daft Punk feature, which was really cool. What did you think of that album, the Random Access Memories album, and are you a fan of Daft Punk?
I really like that record a lot. You know, it's I don't want to say it's a trick, but it's a very good accomplishment. It's difficult to do. To take a genre of music that you want to emulate or give props to, and you want to take that style and you want to bring it into the now, and you want to make it yours as well. It's not an easy thing to do, and I think that Daft Punk with that record accomplished it 100%.
Do you think that there's anywhere left for popular music to go that's going to be as good as what we had in the 70s and 80s and 60s? There are a lot of people who would argue, yes, there are new innovative things being done all the time. And sometimes I change my mind on this every day. Hear wonderful ideas and stuff. I don't know. Is there anything in terms of the pure, like, animalistic almost joy that you get out of a great melody and a great production that's easy to understand as well? Like when I put on a record like, you know, Bad Girls or She Works Hard for the Money or something, I don't need to spend ages. I don't need to, you know, you always hear, oh, give it another spin. You know, this album gets great after you listen to it 20 times.
Yeah.
Frankly, I don't have 20 albums worth of times to listen to every album.
Yeah. Well, in answer to your question, I think the answer is yes. I think there will always be great music made. I think there will always be people who are going to create something that when you put it on is going to lift your spirit, or they're going to tell you a story that's going to encourage you or make you cry, or it's going to connect to your body and soul in some way. That music I believe, will always continue to be made. And how they create that, whether it be with a guitar or with a spaceship, you know, it doesn't really matter. It's about music elevating you, comforting you, being your friend, you know, when you need it.
I think it is good to be optimistic, but sometimes I do feel like, you know, the great records can be made again. You can have a random access memories, you know, album by Daft Punk, but, you know, that's kind of been done before. You know, they did it well and they brought it contemporary, and you know, they put their own spin on it. And Daft Punk are wonderful artists, but, you know, even their best album, like Discovery, was taking little bits of records by people like George Duke and sampling them and putting them all together. It was genius. It sounded unlike anything else, but it was, you know, you could almost argue that had been done before. I mean, you could probably argue that less with Discovery than with Random Access Memories, which was, you know, they got old drummers and session musicians back on to play with them in the studio, didn't they?
I think so. It sounds that way to me.
You know, as a result.
Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, these projects are a good thing. So one of the things that I wanted, you know, to talk about and was really curious to ask you was what was it like working with, you know, the Jacksons? I mean, I think it was like Jermaine Jackson's solo project, right? And it's a duet he did with Michael.
Yes.
Tell Me I'm Not Dreaming.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about that. I mean, coincidentally, I actually interviewed Taito Jackson yesterday. He had a terrible internet connection, but it was amazing to speak to him. How terrible his internet connection was, because he was so much of a legend. I couldn't, bring myself to criticize his poor broadband.
That's pretty funny. Well, it's like we all have those problems on any given day,
Need to get their internet service provided.
Yeah. The Jacksons, he's one brother I didn't know. I didn't know many of them very well. I knew Jermaine the best. I came to know them. I first knew Michael because I had met Michael a couple of times just for being with Donna, and sometimes we would be in the same recording studio. There was a recording studio in LA called, there were two actually. There was one called Westlake and one called Lion Share. And so sometimes Donna and I would be working in the studio, and in one of the other rooms Michael would be there, and so there would be a little catch up, and then also, again, especially when Donna was working with Quincy on the record that they did together, Michael was around a bit. So I got to know Michael a little bit at that then. But my friend Michael Omardian, who is the producer of Jermaine, and was also the producer of Donna's She Works Hard for the Money album, had become a co-writer of mine. And in those days, how I would get gigs and a lot of songwriters would do this then, is you kind of you would try to hook up with a producer who had acts so that you could co-write with the producer and the act, and this way get some songs published and on some records. So I was fortunate enough that Michael, who had the gig to produce Jermaine, brought me in. And I think on that particular album, I think I also co-wrote 3 or 4 songs. And Tell Me I'm Not Dreamin' was one of these songs. And somehow Jermaine played it, for Michael, and Michael got excited about the song and said, "Can I sing it? Why don't we do this as a duet?" And everybody was thrilled and said, "Yeah." And so it happened, but it happened without permission from Michael's record company. So as soon as the song started taking off, they put an injunction against the record, and so basically the record got stalled. After really climbing to the top of the R&B chart, as it started to cross over to the pop chart, it got cut off. So it never fully got its full due. But it's a pretty cool song. I mean, Michael Omardian's track on that song is really kind of cool.
Yeah, that's really annoying.
Well, this is interesting things that happen in a career. I mean, every artist's career will have stories of, the record company president got fired the day your song was coming out. The producer got sick the day that, we've all in the course of a career experienced these kind of stories. So,
Yeah, for sure, and that's that's life.
Yeah,
they work out sometimes, they don't at other points, But from the Jacksons, obviously Michael really, in reality, is, not only one of the most successful and most talented artists of all time, but he was really the only Jackson whose solo career ever took off. But Jermaine was super talented as well, and I know that album was very big at the time, but like these days it'd be far fewer people listening to Jermaine. And would that have therefore been quite a major moment in that album? Not kind of, was that like a make or break moment almost for him? Because he came pretty close, didn't he, to becoming,
yeah.
Janet did it as well, obviously.
Yeah, Janet did it. Yeah, I never thought about that, but that's an interesting analysis because Jermaine was right on the cusp there and did have a couple of records that kind of almost broke through and were getting a lot of play, and he had a big presence. Um, so, I mean, maybe you could say that that was kind of like his make or break moment. If you want to look at it that way, but
I mean, he did make, he made a number of albums, and
yeah, oh yeah, I mean,
probably I'd say he's the most recognizable surviving member
yeah.
of the Jacksons.
Yeah. No, Jermaine's super talented and a really nice man.
Yeah, he's still a legendary artist, but in a way,
without a doubt,
he could have done even better as a solo star. But I mean, he's still achieved more than enough. So
yeah.
Another amazing accomplishment of yours was writing "Starting Over Again," and that's quite a personal song, right? And it ended up finding huge success. Number one record when it was sung by Dolly Parton. But it was quite a personal record, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was a song that was written about the divorce of my parents, and it came about, and that in itself was kind of interesting, because I was an adult already when this was going on, but even as an adult, I experienced a kind of unsettlingness that happens as a result of divorce. So, I was kind of writing this song, not thinking about anything, just expressing myself. And I always tell the story that I was, we were living in this house in Los Angeles, and there was this back bedroom, and I had a little Fender Rhodes back there, and I was in this back bedroom just writing this song. And it was very typical for me in those days to be sitting at a piano somewhere in the house working on a song, and Donna would be going around doing whatever she was doing, like rearranging the furniture or, I don't know. And so at some point, I'm in this little back bedroom, and she opens the door and sticks her head in, and says, this is a really good song, but you should put a line in there that says all the king's horses and all the king's men, and I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. So I keep going, and I figure out a way to put this line in the song. And, the song through a series of, I mean, I've told the story before. You want me to tell the story of how it got to Dolly, sort of?
Yeah, I'd love to. Just
so, I finished writing the song, and Donna is set to go on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, which at the time was the biggest late night TV show in America. And in those days, this was one of the primary ways that artists went out to break their new single. They typically, when the record was coming out, they would go on this show if they were a prominent enough artist to get on the show, and they would perform their new single. So Donna was scheduled to go on this particular show and sing her new single, which was MacArthur Park. And so, a couple of days before, she comes to me and she says, you know what? I think I'm going to sing Starting Over Again on the Tonight Show on Friday. And I look at her, I'm like, what are you talking about? You can't do that. She says, you mean I can't do it? That's what I'm going to do. I was like, well, you're going on the show to sing your new single. This is a song that you haven't even recorded. She's like, I understand that. But maybe if I sing the song on TV, your parents will stay together. Exactly. Well, I told you earlier about who Donna was. And I was like, honey, that is really a beautiful sentiment. And thank you for that. But I don't think you can do it. The company's going to go crazy. And I really don't think it's going to make a difference for my parents. I think it's too late. But Donna being Donna, Friday night goes on the Tonight Show and sings Starting Over Again. And literally the next day, Dolly Parton's people call and say, what is that song? Has it been recorded? Can Dolly record it? And that's how it happened. So this is my tip for songwriters. This is my other little joke that's become part of my shtick. Is that I say to songwriters, so if you want to get a cut on somebody's album, have your wife go on the most popular TV show for music and sing your song, and that's the best way to get a cut. So
very sage advice.
Right.
Should get that in motion.
Yeah.
So Bruce, as well as your career, you know, writing so many hit songs and collaborating with so many, you know, amazing artists, you know, you make your own records, and you know, you're a singer in your own right. And how do you kind of balance writing for other people with that? Is your own solo career as much of a priority, or do you just do things really for the joy of them, as opposed to, like, you know, having huge amounts of ambition when you've already proven so much at this stage?
Well, for me, once Donna died, you know, I'm somebody who has played my whole life. I've written and played my whole life. Bands when I was younger, with Donna throughout our 30 years of marriage together. At a certain point, when I put out my first solo record in 1980, was also the year that Donna and I got married. And right after that, our first child, we already were raising Mimi. Our first child, Brooklyn, was born. You know, and I quickly became aware that I wouldn't be able to maintain myself as a solo artist, Donna be who she was, and maintain the family. It was just not feasibly possible to, something was going to suffer. And since my initial goals and satisfaction in life came from songwriting, I decided to put Bruce Sudano, the artist, on the side and focus on writing and focus on my family and focus on Donna. And that led to a very fulfilling, satisfying life for many years, until our youngest daughter, Amanda, was out of the house, at which point Donna said to me, "You now have time again to be you." And it was in those years of 2005 that I started doing solo Bruce records again. And it wasn't until she actually passed away that I went from, okay, now I'm going to be solo artist Bruce. I'm going to start performing again live. I'm going to take this seriously. I feel that it's what gives me purpose. So I basically these days only write for myself. I haven't written for somebody else in years now. And not that I have anything against it, and not that I wouldn't if somebody asked me to do it, but my driving force now is really making Bruce be the best Bruce that he can be. And I continue to evolve. I continue to be inspired. I think I continue to improve and to refine and discover who I am as an artist.
And you recently released a single, right?
I recently released a single. Actually, I have two singles out right now. One is more of a mainstream pop song called "Keep Doing What You're Doing," and we have some bobbleheads, and you know we've done some cute little stuff to go along with it. It's kind of like a little bit of a groove. I always say I was channeling Bill Withers when I wrote it, but and then we also have another song called "American Sunset," which is going through another channel of promotion. which is a song that's dealing with our current culture and my current concern for my country and the direction we're heading, and my belief that we need a correction course. So this is a song that voices my sound of warning and a call to recognize America and let's correct ourselves. So that's the parallel of what's going on, and I have a record coming out October 23rd. It's volume 2. A few months ago, I put out an EP, Spirals Volume 1. Coming October 23rd, I'm in a commercial now. Hey, yeah, coming October 23rd is Spirals Volume 2, Time and the Space in Between, and it's a 7-song EP that. It's kind of a mix of, I've recently remarried, so there's some songs that deal with the emotion of falling in love again and all of that. And then there's also some songs that deal with real life and our culture. And, they're all a reflection of things that I was feeling and felt compelled to write about. And basically my philosophy for this phase of my life is keep living and keep writing. So,
yeah. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, keep doing what you're doing. But don't boom.
Thank you very much for taking the time to join me on this podcast. I really appreciated it, and I really enjoyed talking to you. And normally I ask people to name, who they think the greatest artist of all time is, or their favorite song or something, but I kind of wanted to leave it here with something of my own, which is that to all my listeners who haven't listened to that much Donna Summer, go out and do so, because it really, really will just bring a lot of joy into your life. Like that. Yeah. That's just factual information.
That's exactly right.